Story 1. This happened a few years ago, so some details are a bit fuzzy, and the conversation is paraphrased. I was working as a Tier 2 technical support specialist for a company that managed the professional email services, domain name system DNS management, and a significant portion of the website building and web hosting services for my country's largest internet service provider ISP. Despite being a tiny, almost insignificant company in the grand scheme of things, we held a surprising amount of power that I will likely never have at my fingertips again. One day, I received a ticket from the ISP. A major client company was transitioning from our proprietary email services to Microsoft 365 or a similar service. Typically, this meant that I would assist the client through the process of changing DNS records, migrating inboxes, backing up emails, and sometimes even setting up configurations on the Microsoft side. While this wasn't technically part of my job, the ISP's Tier 1 technical support team was woefully undertrained for anything remotely technical and poorly prepared for most tasks, even those that were purely commercial. My company was great, and they treated me well, so I often went beyond my official duties. So, the ticket came in. ISP, the client is moving from Service X to Service Y. Please remove their subscription from the database. Me. There seems to be some sort of mistake, which is very common. We remove the subscription only once the new service is set up and running. Otherwise, everything in their subscribed package, including all email storage, DNS records, and their website, will be deleted. You likely want to change their subscription to exclude email services, but keep the rest since your Microsoft subscription does not include DNS and web hosting management. Even that change should only occur after they have their new email service set up. ISP, please confirm and proceed with removing their subscription. Me, are you absolutely sure? This process is irreversible. All their emails, DNS records, and the entire website, including the database, will be permanently deleted. ISP, the request has been submitted. Please remove the subscription. At this point, it had been a couple of days since the first ticket, so I called my boss over. He was an absolutely wonderful and highly intelligent guy, and I explained to him what they were asking me to do. Boss, all right, let's show them why they pay us because we know things, and they don't. Don't delete the subscription, but suspend all the services that would be affected. Keep those tickets handy and expect a phone call. If they call you, direct them to me. That felt incredibly satisfying. I did feel bad for the client because their entire company essentially shut down for an afternoon. But when the ISP called my work phone directly, a rare occurrence, usually reserved for emergencies, and the polite lady on the other end asked what had happened with the client, her tone suggested she was doing her best to remain calm while gathering all sides before making a decision. I pointed her to the tickets where I had very clearly stated what would happen if I followed their instructions, then advised her to contact my boss. Later, my boss told me to let them sweat for a couple of hours because the process should have been irreversible, and then we restored the services. The ISP was, once again, absolutely thrilled with our work, and my name kept coming up even more often as the go-to person for solving problems. Story 2. I had just graduated from college, did not do an internship, shame on me, and had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I was on Indeed.com, job posting site, just throwing up my resume to see what stuck. I was not having much luck finding anything. That was until I received a call from a security company. You know, the company that advertises itself as the largest security company in the world. Anyways, they brought me in for an interview, which was actually disguised as a job offer. Experience now would have seen that as a red flag, but I was green and didn't know any better. For those that don't know, security works like this. Client, I need security. Security company, we can provide guards to you at X plus $25, X as the guards pay. Client, great. It's a horrible business model, but again, I was young and ignorant. In order to protect my anonymity, the client will hereafter be referred to as Center. who Center was is irrelevant to this story. After several HR hiccups, more red flags, I finally made it to Center to start guarding their facility. I cannot emphasize how good of a job this could have been. I was paid well for the work I was providing, not like the security company, but still well. The job itself was cake. My coworkers were awesome, more on that in a bit, and there was such camaraderie among the other guards. Well, all except one person, the site supervisor. We'll call her Karen, because that's what that witch looked like. Unfortunately, because this happened so many years ago, I can't provide as many juicy details for a good suspenseful build-up, but I'll try my best to fill in as many things as I can. I worked with the greatest group of men and women I will probably ever work with. I worked with former Marines, law enforcement, naval ship captains, high-ranking military, pretty much an elite group of boys and girls. I was clearly a boy in their world, but for some reason, they really liked me, motivated me to reach for more. The reality was, they had their careers in service, and just wanted something to get them out of the house. Don't get me wrong, they weren't old and decrepit. Most of them were from the North, and had already retired out, and were receiving a good pension. They kept reiterating it to anyone who would talk to them. The thing was, Karen was just like me in that she had a bad resume, had no experience, much less be qualified to supervise this elite group. Once she realized that, that's when the paranoia began to set in. She had a list. Everyone that was on it. Their workplace became a living hell. Not only that this witch chased you off, but if she caught wind of where you were going, she'd actively call your next employer to drag your name through the mud. It was sick. Not only was she toxic as a boss, but she was woefully incompetent. Let me give you a summary of some of the things Karen did. Karen constantly threatened termination, openly admitting to targeting employees and minority employees especially, continuously revised the schedule throughout the week, causing multiple guards to arrive, or sometimes post uncovered, wielded the schedule as a weapon to punish guards she didn't like, degraded our staff as well as Center's staff on a routine basis, intimidated guards requesting leave, falsified timesheets, illegally initiated traffic stops on Center's employees, disgusting amount of sexual harassment, warned us guards not to speak with Center's employees, and went through several mood swings a shift. Yeah, she was a real piece of work. Being located in a southern state, there was no union for us. The best we could do was keep firing emails up the chain of command. When I say we, I mean them. At the time, I didn't have the confidence I do now, and I lurked in the shadows. My thought process was, if these people, who are way smarter than me, aren't able to affect change, what chance did I have? Karen's actions I listed above were quite routine, and were displayed on a daily basis. Slowly, but surely, the great men and women I came to know and love would come to my shack and say, "Hey, I just can't do it anymore." It was so sad. I respected these people so much, but they were just cannon fodder in Karen's insane war. When the new employees showed up to replace the ones that left, they would all say deuces as soon as they arrived. One night, I was talking with one of Center's employees, because screw anything Karen had to say, and they were laughing because a report had just come out about how my company had a turnover rate of 97.5%. Even though it could have been easy to figure out, I had never thought about it, and that left me shaken. By that point, all the original staff was gone, and I was now a supervisor, not dissimilar to the Hitler Youth situation. That's honestly how it felt like. I knew I was a passenger on the Titanic. How we didn't lose that contract just blows my mind. Not only did my company hate her, but everyone who worked for Center did as well, because she made their lives a living hell by being Karen wannabe cop. I figured if we didn't lose the contract, I would end up on the blacklist eventually and get chased out. However, for all the misery she caused people I respected in Center, I wasn't about to go into the night quietly. And that's where the revenge begins. Remember that college degree I mentioned earlier? Yeah, it's in communications. It's a stupid degree that I don't recommend anyone getting, unless you like barely above minimum wage. But what that degree entailed was lots of research, papers, interviewing, etc. I really didn't know how good I was at it, until after this plan concluded and used it several times later. Different stories for a different day. Now, I understand a lot of people might be judging the way I write this post. There's a huge difference, though. Right now, I'm chilling while I casually type this. The difference is I wrote a formal piece for a professional setting, not dissimilar to lawyer jargon. I knew what would happen if I went up the chain of command. There's no amount of technical allegations I could throw at the security company, because they are siding with the very likely option that I'm just saying nonsense that won't go beyond HR. I had already secured a new job, in a different field, notice already in, so I had nothing to lose at this point. I interviewed all current staff and the former staff I trusted, and gathered every single grievance they had against Karen. I still have that list on my desktop, and you read some of the highlights above. They had no idea what I was doing, except, he has an idea. I don't recommend anyone doing what I did, but like I said, I was out the door, and moving on to a different field, so I didn't care anymore. I'm honestly not entirely sure of the ranking structure that Center had. There were so many chiefs and different departments within. I had to trust somebody though. One boss, who I'll refer to as Bossman from now on, hated Karen with a passion, because her nonsense made his life hell. I had to test his loyalty though. One morning, while Bossman and I were alone, I began a little light interrogation, while feeding him intel about the guard situation being under Karen's thumb. He agreed that the turnover was unacceptable, but he wasn't high enough up the chain to affect any change, unless he had some sort of proof. I didn't go into details, but I informed him I had a list, and I'd be happy to give it to him. He said absolutely. The problem was that Karen was hella paranoid, would know if I showed up when I wasn't scheduled, and rightfully suspect mutiny was afoot. I told him I'd meet him at 6 a.m. the next day. I went home that night and put the finishing touches on the list. There was one final thing I had to do. This was a guarded facility, and I'd have to get past the guard without raising suspicion, or alert Karen I was there. When I got to the gate, I don't know what was coming over me. I lifted up the envelope my letter was in and said, "Mark obvious fake name, I was never here." He just looked at me, nodded, and let me through. Why, I'll never know. Didn't ask. He had no idea about the list. He hated Karen too, but he did a lot of talking, so I never shared it with him. I met Bossman, handed him the envelope, we shook hands, and that was that. I was already on the schedule to start my next job that overnight, so I went home to sleep. I never expected anything to come of this, because nothing had happened after so many good faith attempts with proof. I just did it, so I could walk away with a clean conscience. I went to work that night, turned off my phone, and when I came back to the car to have a smoke, I turned on my phone. My phone began flooding with text messages. I really don't have the full story of what happened. This is what I collected from my ex-coworkers. Apparently, Bossman with several of the other chiefs had forced my security company to have an on-site meeting, told them what a piece of trash Karen was, how much of a liability she was, and to remove her from the site permanently. I also heard she was wailing while she was being escorted to her car. Ah, yes, salty tears. Good riddance. Story 3. So the year before COVID hit the US, I started working for one of the major airlines at my local airport as a baggage handler. I absolutely loved the job. I just enjoyed being around planes from the ground level. When I started, there were no full-time positions available, so I was working part-time 6-hour nights 5 times a week. The way it usually works is each gate has a lead the person with extra training to do the load planning and scanning and towing the planes to the runway, as well as guiding them in, and a few baggage handlers. Now, I had only been there a few months, but I was working hard and showing that I was a team player. I decided I was going to try to become a lead, even though they usually want you to work a year or so as a handler first. I was confident and ended up passing the training course with ease. The problem was they had no availability for more leads, so I was put into what was basically an on-call lead kind of thing where they could upgrade me for the day if they needed more leads. Now, whenever they upgrade you to lead, even if it's for a single flight, they have to pay you the extra one. $75 the leads get for your whole shift. Remember, I work 6-hour days, so $50 is the cost to make me a lead for my shift. Now, for a few months everything was great. I was a part-time baggage handler, but I was working as a lead for my whole shift every shift, and I was loving every second of it. Something about towing huge planes full of people to the runway was just awesome to me. Enter everyone's favorite virus, good old COVID-19. Within months, the airline industry is tanking pretty hard as nobody wants to travel and get stuck somewhere. Supervisors are being told to cut costs everywhere they can, which makes sense given the circumstances. Cue up the night of my MC. It's maybe 11 p.m. and I'm on till 1 a.m. Supervisors have sent a large chunk of workers home, and those of us left are being sent all over the airport to cover the flights we do still have coming. I get a call from the office that assigns your flights, and am told to go grab a box and a walkie, the stuff needed to plug into the plane to talk to the flight deck. They tell me to head to the gate when the flights land at 5 and to just put in my request for lead when asked to be a lead. You put it in on the company app and a supervisor approves your pay raise for the day. I get to my gate, check the load coming off the plane, brief the handlers on what's coming down, and we all get to our spots to bring the plane in. I see the plane coming down the lane to my gate, and at the same time my zone supervisor drives up to my gate and asks me to come over. He then tells me something along the lines of, "Hey man, we can't upgrade you to lead right now. We just can't swing that extra expense right now." I respond with, "Okay, so who's going to bring this plane? Is nobody else on the gate lead trained? And supervisors are already not allowed to do any of our work because of the union rule." He then tells me he is going to go find another lead to bring it in, and to just assist him when he arrives. So I'm like, sure, whatever. Now it's important to note that planes have very tight metrics for how long it can take to bring a flight in, unload and reload for the next flight. The flight pulls up to the edge of my gate and comes to a stop as there's no lead there guiding them in, so the flight just sits there waiting, and the entire gate crew are also just standing around waiting. 20 minutes go by and the radio I still have on me goes off, and the office is mad. They want to know why the hell I'm holding this flight short and not bringing it in, to which obviously I reply with, "What do you mean? Ex-supervisor told me they couldn't afford to pay me for lead work today and that he would find someone else." He then asks me if I can please just bring it in for him, and I said, "Sorry, but if you're not willing to pay me to do the lead work, then I'm only going to do the handler work in being paid for." As it turns out, they sent too many leads home this night, and the ones they did have were all busy on flights already. After about 45 minutes, a lead from 2 terminals over finally strolls up, and we're able to unload the plane as usual. But that 45 minutes the plane sat idle at the gate cost thousands in extra fuel plus overtime for flight attendants forced into mandatory overtime from the situation. Not to mention all the passengers who were angry about the extra weight were all comped some credits with the airline for the trouble. I also come to find out the supervisor's bonus were based on flight turn time, and this 45 minutes short hold probably cost him his bonus and a write-up. So basically the supervisor didn't want to pay me the $10.50 for me to be a lead for the day, and instead cost the airline thousands on a heavily delayed plane at the gate, and probably his yearly bonus, and that all could have been avoided by just paying me the extra $75 HR for my 6-hour shift. Story 4. So, I've got an acquaintance, Richard, who has always been of the "I know better than you" school of thought. What makes it worse is that he literally received his PhD in physics from one of my country's top universities about 6 months ago, so he's not a dummy. The problem is that he thinks that because he's a physics genius, that means he knows better than everyone about everything. Just an example, my kids are in Montessori schools. This is a decision my wife and I reached together, and we're very happy with it. When he heard, he went on a 30-minute rantelture about how we're throwing our money away and Montessori is nonsense. When I told him that I had read and even professionally translated studies proving the opposite, and gave him some real-world examples: Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Sergey Brin, Jeff Bezos, Larry Page, etc., he still would not admit he might not be 100% correct. Not the subject of this revenge, but so you understand the person we're dealing with. Another thing that's important to note is that Richard does not have Asperger's or anything similar. We joke about this all the time, and he's been tested from here until next week. He's just a really smart, socially oblivious pain in the neck. Given all of the above, I try to limit my time with him. But unfortunately, that isn't always possible, and last week we were both at the same group braai for a friend Jack, who was visiting back home from overseas. I've known Jack since grade school, so we brought our families and made it more than just a long time, no see type of thing. At some point later on in the afternoon, my eldest, let's call him Awesome, Tenyo, came to me really sad and said she wanted to go home. When I asked her why, she said that Richard had just spent 15 minutes telling her that she shouldn't eat hot dogs because they're unhealthy, and he explained what went into hot dogs and what they're made out of. Awesome is not a vegetarian, knows that the beef and chicken she eats used to be live animals, and has never professed interest in vegetarianism. At the same time, when a kid is eating a hot dog, they don't care or want to know what's inside. We spoke a bit. I calmed her down, and I told her to ignore Richard and go play with her siblings and her friends. Being a kid, she was thankfully easily distracted by something else and moved on. I didn't want to make a fuss with Jack or with Richard, so I just let it be. This turned out to be a mistake. About 30 minutes later, I heard Awesome scream and began crying. I ran over to her. Richard had come up to her and knocked her hot dog out of her hand, saying she shouldn't eat that garbage. I handed Awesome over to my wife for damage control, and I took Richard aside and told him that you don't ever talk to a man's kids without permission. B, you don't ever teach a man's kids without permission, and C, you sure as heck don't ever touch a man's kids without permission. He doesn't have kids, so I still wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. This turned out to be a mistake. Instead of doing the mature thing and moving on, he decided to double down on the hot dog issue. This was the hill he was going to die on. My kids shouldn't be eating hot dogs. Keeping Jack in mind, I disengaged and told him to stay away from my family. After this, I kept my eye on him, and he didn't come near them. Jack enjoyed his time. We all ate some good meat. End of the story as far as I'm concerned. This turned out to be a mistake. A few days later, we received a visit from a child protection officer who claimed that we were neglecting our kids, specifically Awesome. She came in and saw that while the house could have been cleaner, what house with kids is spotless? Everything was fine. She sat with Awesome for a few minutes and asked her some questions, said everything was fine, and left. First thing I did was call a friend of mine who is a lawyer, just to be on the safe side. He said it looked to him like we were in the clear, but we should keep in touch with him just in case. Next, I began working the grapevine. It turned out that Richard had been offended by how I treated him after the hot dog incident, so he filed a false anonymous report. Being Richard, and never thinking he could ever be wrong, he was even talking about it as if people should be proud of him for what he did. I had to make sure, though, so the last thing I did before dropping the hammer on him was confronting him personally. I set my phone to record and went to his house. He doubled down yet again, saying we were torturing Awesome. He's the one who called protective services on us, and he'd do it again in a heartbeat. This turned out to be a mistake. I'm not the violent type, but I swear I wanted to break the jerk in half. I told him that if he came near myself or anyone in my family again, I'd have a restraining order put out on him, and I'd make sure every single one of our shared acquaintances knew why. I listened to the recording in my car, and his admission that he filed a false report came out clear as day. I immediately forwarded it to my lawyer, who said he'll get the ball rolling with some friends of his with the public prosecutor to see if we could get Richard in trouble, using his admission. Still waiting on that, the wheels of justice turn slowly sometimes. Then, I enacted my actual revenge. See, after he got his PhD, Richard bragged about the new flat he'd be moving into as soon as he sold his current flat. To that end, he renovated most of his current flat, including putting in lots of new and expensive features that required lots of electrical work. He did the same in his new flat. He did most of the electrical work himself, which is a big no-no unless you're licensed. I called in an inspector on both of his flats, who asked to see certification on who did the electrical work. Obviously, there was no certification. It wouldn't surprise me if, Richard being Richard, He began arguing with the inspector that his work was good enough and he didn't need to pay someone else to do it for him. I haven't seen or spoken to Richard since, but I've heard that he had to bring in a certified electrician to examine every single change he made in both flats. This meant dismantling everything and having it inspected. Turns out the buyers of his old flat weren't happy with the delay in receiving the keys, and were even unhappier when they learned why there was a delay. They walked away from the deal and are taking him to court. Because his sale fell through, he's now in the hole paying mortgages on 2 flats. I don't know if there was a fine levied against him, but I sure as hell hope so. Lesson of the story: you don't ever screw with a man's kids. Story 5. This happened a few months ago, and for context, I, 29, female, had just been in a pretty bad car accident back in April where I had partially wrapped the front end of my car around a tree at 50 miles per hour. Fortunately, I came out mostly intact, aside from a broken collarbone and severe muscle strain in my legs. I went to the store with a friend and decided that I no longer needed to use a mobility scooter and wanted to start walking again. She parked as close to the store as she could, but I grossly overestimated the strength I had in my legs. By the time I got into the store, I was practically using my friend as a crutch because my legs were trying to give out. Thankfully, there was a bench near the entrance inside where she helped me sit down. She asked if I was sure I didn't want a scooter, and being stubborn, I insisted that I was fine. We weren't in any hurry as we had no other plans, and we were mostly there just to chat with one of the door hosts, who was a friend of ours. The plan was to sit and rest my legs while we chatted and then go do our shopping. My friend got me a shopping cart to use when we started shopping, but mentioned that she had to go to the bathroom and asked me to wait for her to get back. I was still chatting with our door host friend at the time, so I agreed. Shortly after, it started to get busy, so I stopped talking to the door host so they could do their job. I decided to start scrolling through my phone while I waited for my friend to return. I was leaning forward with my good arm on the side of the cart as I did this to let people know I was using it, even though it was empty. I also want to mention that the cart bay was completely full, and you'd have to pass it to get to where I was sitting. This is relevant. Just as I was starting to wonder if my friend had gotten delayed, a lady approached my cart and, while I was still leaning on it, began putting her child in the child seat. I said, "What do you think you're doing?" The lady responded, "What? You're not using it?" I replied, "Yes, I am. I'm waiting on my friend in the bathroom." She retorted, "Well, I need it more than you do. Can't you see my baby's tired?" I then gestured to the cart bay and said, "There are plenty of carts that you just passed to get to this one. Why didn't you just grab one of those like a normal person?" She shot back, "Why can't you just grab one yourself and let me have this one? I don't have time for this. My baby's tired and you're being rude." I responded, "Let's see, I'm just sitting here minding my own business while waiting for my friend, and a random lady is trying to get me to let her take my cart. But I'm the rude one. Somehow, I doubt that." She exclaimed, "Ugh, why do people your age always have to act so entitled? Didn't your parents teach you to respect your elders? I'm telling you to give me this cart. Now hand it over." She then tried to move the cart, but I had my foot on it, so she couldn't get far. I said, "I don't care how old you are. My parents taught me that respect is earned, not given, so take your kid out of my cart and leave. You're not entitled to just take whatever you want simply because you're older. Go get your own cart." At this point, I stood up to yank my cart back, but that proved to be a mistake, as I almost fell into the cart due to my weak legs. Instinctively, I used both arms to catch myself on the cart, but that was also a bad idea due to my broken collarbone. All this to say, I made a very bad decision, and the amount of pain I was in afterward was significant, as I ended up landing on the floor. My door host friend heard me yelp and came over to ask what had happened. The lady claimed that she was just walking by when I had stopped her and tried to steal her cart. The door host looked at her, then at me, and then back at her. The door host said, "I watched her friend give that cart to her when they came in. She should be back any second now. The lady insisted, but I have a kid, and this person is just faking whatever it is she has for attention. Make her get another one. And with that, she walked away. No fanfare, no police called, no justice. Just me sitting on the floor, trying not to cry from the amount of pain I was in. My door host friend helped me back up onto the bench and got me another cart just as my friend returned. When I told her what had happened, she was upset, but ultimately agreed there wasn't anything we could do since the lady was long gone by then. I ended up needing that scooter after all. I was reminded of this story when my friend and I were talking about entitled people on Reddit, and she told me to post this. For anyone wondering, I'm doing much better now, other than some slight stiffness in my shoulder. My legs are completely healed. Story 6. My sister is the cliché of the spoiled rich kid, just not in Beverly Hills. What she wants, she gets, and she'll do whatever she has to do to get it without having to work for it. She's made it clear to me that she is the chosen one, and I'm nothing. My attitude through all this is that I don't care. I let her deal with the issues that our parents have created. I'm good with my life. I have my degree and career, so I'm content. I've had prior conversations with my mom regarding this, and she seemed to maybe consider what I was saying. It even seemed like she was starting to work on fixing some of the issues my sister has. When it comes to my parents, really, my family, I don't actively seek any of them out. I talk to my parents once a month. If I'm lucky, I let them call me, and usually it's one parent who will relay any necessary information back to the other. We also live almost 3 hours apart, so that's another reason we don't talk much. Apparently, the issues that my parents have created with my sister have escalated even further, and they're worse than ever. Bad enough that my mom drove 3 hours to visit me. Imagine my surprise when I opened the door to my house and saw my mom on the other side. During the conversation, she told me that she heard what I said about my sister being useless and that she was trying to slowly fix the problem. She thought she was making progress until she found out her husband bought my sister a condo and was covering all her expenses. I asked her why this mattered to me. I reminded her that I was just an issue that had to be dealt with her and my dad's words to describe me and my existence. I reminded her that there was nothing I could do to help them or fix the problem they created. For the first time in my life, my mom acknowledged this and admitted the way I was treated. While she didn't really apologize, she did say that I was treated pretty badly. She told me she was telling me this because it needed to be said somewhere. I had to ask my mom some really hard questions, mostly because I was trying, in my own way, to understand some of this. My parents' marriage for the last few years has mostly been like they're just roommates. Divorce for them is out of the question because of how complicated their finances and estate are. If they were to divorce, it would be friendly. They really don't love each other like they should. They love each other as friends, but the romantic love is gone. With that being said, I asked my mom the question, "Have you or Dad been seeing anyone else?" She immediately responded that she was not, and that she truly felt Dad wasn't either. I asked her if my sister had something that she was holding over Dad's head. She asked what that could be. I asked if maybe Dad and my sister were having some kind of unhealthy relationship and she was blackmailing him to get what she wants, or she would go public. I told her that up to this point, my sister had all the usual spoiled kid things: cars, credit cards, vacations, and trips, all of which my mom was also in on. But this purchase was more than any spoiled child could ever expect in their life. I reminded her that when I was 18, I was told that I was on my own and had to figure out life. Meanwhile, my sister, at 25, still has no idea how to be an adult. It makes me wonder what they're not telling me or what secrets they're keeping for my sister to have this much power over them. Again, my mom said that in her heart of hearts, this isn't the case, that they just messed up pretty badly. If this were an "Am I the bad guy?" post, this is where I would be the bad guy. I asked my mom what she expected me to do about this. What did she think she was going to gain by telling me all this? And what does she think I can do about it? She told me that she knows I can't do anything about it. She acknowledged that there isn't anything I can do about this, and that she just needed to get this out in the open. I asked her if she confronted Dad about these issues, and she said his excuse was that he was trying to help get my sister out of the house, and that this was the only way he felt he could. He said that retirement for both of them is on the horizon and that they would make the money back once they liquidated and downsized. I told her that from their standpoint, it would make sense. But Dad forgot one big issue. My sister can't maintain herself. Mom said that this was an issue she was trying to work on with my sister. She sat my sister down and told her that she needs to work on figuring out her future, and was trying to encourage her to get her real estate license and go into the family business. By this point, I was upset, and I didn't even know why. I told my mom that I didn't want to know anything, and that I just wanted to be done with the whole conversation. I told her that it made no sense for her to tell me any of this. I offered to let her sleep in one of my guest rooms, but she said it was okay and that she had reservations at a hotel. She left, and I went to bed feeling angry. This morning, I had my aha moment. I can't do anything about it, and there's nothing I want to do about it. This literally doesn't even concern me. All I can do is let it go in one ear and out the other. I have nothing to offer, and even if I did, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't. I'm not here for sympathy or advice. Comment if you'd like. I guess, just like my mom, I need to get this out in the open so it doesn't have to sit with me anymore.